Today, we're jumping into a topic that, well, it's a big one. It's one of the most controversial and, frankly, most difficult ideas in all of Christianity, the doctrine of hell. And let's just get right to the heart of it. Is this whole thing just a scare tactic? Is it designed to frighten people into belief? That's the exact question we're going to dig into. By looking at what the source materials teach, we'll try to understand what hell is said to be, why it even exists, and who is supposedly destined for it. Okay, so first things first, to even have this conversation, we need to be on the same page. We have to get past the common caricatures, the cartoons with devils and pitchforks, and see how these theological sources actually define hell. And look, the sources don't mince words. This isn't presented as some metaphor for a bad time on earth. It's described as a literal, real place of conscious suffering and final judgment after death. What's really interesting here is how all these different biblical descriptions get pulled together. It's not just one thing. It's a combination of concepts, right? It's the total loss of God's presence and goodness, which is symbolized by darkness. It's active punishment, symbolized by a lake of fire. And it's a state of pure, unending misery with this sense of absolute finality. Now, this might sound like a total contradiction at first. How can you be separated from God but still be in His presence? Well, the theology here explains it as a separation from His grace, His love, His blessing, while being completely subject to His presence as a holy judge. And that leads to the really big question, doesn't it? From this theological standpoint, why would a perfect God even create a place like this? Why is it considered necessary at all? This slide really just lays out the core conflict. The sources argue there's this massive, infinite gap between God's perfect, holy nature and humanity's sinful condition. The idea is that a God who is perfectly just can't, by His very nature, just shrug His shoulders and overlook what's described as a deep rebellion against Him. So here's the absolute linchpin of the argument. Hell is presented as the ultimate logical consequence of sin. In this view, justice demands a payment. A price has to be paid. And for those who haven't accepted the alternative payment that's offered, hell is that payment. One of our sources from Japan frames it this way. It argues that when people say hell isn't fair, they're essentially trying to apply their own flawed, human sense of justice to a perfectly righteous God. The argument is that God's justice is the ultimate standard, not ours. Okay, so this is where it gets really personal and for a lot of people, really difficult. According to these teachings, who actually ends up there? And there's this fascinating disconnect. A source mentions a Gallup poll that found 78% of Americans thought they had a good or excellent chance of getting into heaven, and yet the teachings we're looking at paint a very, very different picture. This is a huge point in the source material. It's argued over and over again that just being a good person isn't the ticket. In fact, one sermon describes how a highly moral, upstanding person could still end up in what he calls a cooler hell, maybe a place with less punishment, but still eternally separated from God. So, in this framework, it all comes down to one thing. It's not about weighing your good deeds against your bad deeds. The single deciding factor is whether or not you have accepted Christ's payment for your sin. If not, you're still personally on the hook for your own rebellion against God. And the Bible is cited as being incredibly specific about this. This list from the book of Revelation gets brought up a lot. You can see it covers a huge range of things, and the theological message is that any unaddressed sin, whether it seems big or small to us, results in the exact same final outcome. Which brings us full circle, right back to where we started. Is all this talk of fire and final judgment just a way to scare people into believing? Or is there something else going on here? To try and answer that, an evangelist in our sources, Ray Comfort, uses this really powerful analogy that's meant to completely reframe the whole conversation, to move it away from fear and more toward understanding. You see how this just flips the perspective? The parachute, which represents God's offer of salvation, it seems completely unnecessary, maybe even a little insulting, until you understand the danger, until you know the plane is going down. The bad news of the coming judgment has to be understood first before the good news of salvation makes any sense at all. So when you look at it through that lens, the warning about hell isn't meant to be a threat from a cruel dictator. It's presented as a desperate warning from a loving God, basically pleading with people to take the one and only escape route that He's provided. And in the end, that's the fundamental choice the sources leave you with. Is the idea of hell an unloving threat that should just be dismissed? Or is it, in a strange and difficult way, a loving warning that should be seriously considered? According to these teachings, the answer you come to has eternal consequences. Thank you for watching this explainer.